I want to dig just a little bit deeper into to what you just said, and I'm wondering what ways do you look like when you talk about prog rock, when you talk about ambient music, hyperpop, we've covered a lot of ground here, so I'm not going to list all of it, obviously. But,
Yeah.
when you look outside of the classical, Western or even contemporary classical repertoire, what do you grab from those genres for your music? How does it inspire the work that you do?
It inspires it in a lot of the ways that we're talking about, like a couple or a handful of things that I'll list is like one thing that these are all kind of more philosophical in a way rather than like sonically. Like one thing that that kind of music inspires me is like the fact that people do it in all sorts of different venues where and that it can exist in all these different kinds of spaces and have different reactions in different spaces. Another thing that it influences me is that, or another way that it influences me is the way that that music places emphasis on the recorded medium and the way that that music places emphasis on like having an album and having that album almost be like a statement and like a business card or like like something that is a statement. This is something I've tried to struggle a lot with lately, especially like when I meet random people like on the train or like at coffee shops or things like that, and they say like, oh, you're a musician, like what should I listen to and what should I find? And I'm just like, I don't know where I start. Do I send you this like
Yeah.
guitar piece that I played? Do I send you this piece of mine for somebody? Because it's just like in one way, I value the kind of multifaceted approach that we have to have nowadays in order to be like successful, independent composers and creatives and things like that. But in another way, it's like for like a pop art, it's so easy to be like, yeah, here's my most recent single, here's my video on YouTube or whatever, or here's my recent album or something, and it's like not a thing that even people that are just composers, like people that don't really do a lot of performing, like where do you start, you know? So I think that's something I'm trying to think a lot about and take something from is like I think a lot of classical music, there's obviously places where they go away from this, like New Amsterdam and Cantaloupe and these. There's certain labels that definitely diverge from this, but like classical music uses recording so much as like almost archival, even when it's a studio recording or even when it's a performance. It's like even when it's like a professional studio recording or a release, it's so much like this is a document of the piece or something rather than the actual piece of art itself. And I think that's valid and interesting in a lot of ways because it means that you have these different recordings of the same piece that you can play against each other. And I think that's really interesting and important for performers. But like myself as somebody who didn't get to see a lot of live music and like no live classical music until I was older, the access to recordings is so important to me. And being able to have like good quality recordings of things, that's such like an obvious thing for the pop or electronic music world. Like that's the starting point, not the performance, right? So I definitely place more emphasis on the recording being representative rather than a performance. So
Yeah. I mean, as someone who does not perform, I have been a performer. I don't consider myself one anymore, for better or for worse. What you're talking about, like the psychology of making a recording of a piece of music, for me, and this is something that I have thought about, I've struggled with, is, for example, I just recorded a string quartet piece. And to me, it's like the way I approach that recording is okay, like this is going to be it. This is going to have to serve as an example of anyone who chooses to play this piece in the future. When it's actually like you listen back to old recordings of older pieces and it's like, oh, I wish I could change this. That's what I feel like. I wish I could change this piece. I'm
mhm.
noticing all these things I want to change about it, but there's a recording, so I can't. And that's something that having this conversation, I realize it's like that doesn't have to be the rule. you
No, no,
know
no, no. Obviously, things change for
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
And so I think what you're saying is very interesting from the perspective of I guess the way we are all mostly conditioned, probably from institutions, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot to be said about that. It. I mean, I change depending on the day and the piece and everything too, because I think there's also something very beautiful about the fact that in this music, like it's a norm that there can be all these different recordings of the same piece that are so different, or that, yeah, a piece could be recorded before, but you can change it. Like, yeah, like I think that's something really interesting and really cool about classical music at the exact same time, even though I innately or in my core, I kind of am the flip side of that, for better or for worse as well. So
Thank you so much for tuning in to Micromaker by Loose Leaf Transmissions. We hope you enjoyed this brief glimpse into the inner workings of the creative life. If this resonated with you, be sure to check out the full conversation on Music Maker with Tyler Klein, a podcast exploring craft and process, philosophy and inspiration, and the honest, often messy parts of being an artist, creative uncertainty, purpose and identity, and resilience. You can find Music Maker wherever you get your podcasts or by visiting musicmakerpodcast.com.